in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for NCEA's webinar, Diocesan Choral Festivals, Guidelines and Organization, presented in partnership with American Federation Pueri Cantores. I am Andrea Kopp, Manager of Educational Resources for NCEA, and I'm happy to host this webinar for you today. Before we begin, please know that all your microphone connections have been muted. If you have questions during today's presentation, please send those through the question box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To ask a question, use your mouse to click into the blank box area. Type your question using your keyboard and then click Send. The webinar presentation will last about an hour. You can post your questions at any time throughout the presentation to be added to the queue. Immediately following the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a brief survey about your webinar experience. I thank you in advance for providing us with this valuable feedback. For those of you who are attending the webinar live, you'll find a copy of the presentation materials and a certificate of attendance in the Handouts section of your GoToWebinar panel. You may download those handouts at any time. You'll receive an email tomorrow with instructions on accessing this recording. Let us begin, as we do all things, in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Now I'm proud to introduce our presenters. Mr. Lee Gwozdz, Director of Music at Corpus Christi Cathedral, and Director of Sacred Music in the Diocese of Corpus Christi, Texas, and Dr. Catherine Muzzy, Principal of St. Edward the Confessor Parish School in the Diocese of Orange, California. Welcome, Lee and Kathy. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm very glad to be here, so I hope that all of you will learn a lot from this webinar today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Andrea said, my name is Dr. Kathy Muzzy, and I'm the principal of a parish school in the Diocese of Orange. We are a school that loves our music ministry, and we actually host our Diocesan Choral Festival in the spring and an Advent Festival in December. So I will start out our presentation with just an overview of why host an elementary or high school music festival, basic planning elements of a festival, types of festivals that you might consider, and then enrollment in marketing, finances, some of the technical aspects that I learned the hard way when we hosted our first festival that are very important. How to give feedback to choirs, and then Lee will take over from there with some more detailed information about repertoire and some of the other festivals that are available throughout our country and within our church. So I'll start out with the big question, why host a festival? Well, here in the Diocese of Orange, our music ministers, our principals love the opportunity to get together, and we have found over the past, I don't even know how long we've done it, our school has hosted the Spring Festival now for about 6 years, but we found that it's a great opportunity for our music directors and our choral teachers as well as our principals to come together and share ideas. It gives all of our learners an opportunity to perform outside of their school, which is fun for everyone, both in the audience and up on the risers. Typically, our choral festival is coordinated with our Department of Catholic Schools, although there are festivals throughout the country that are organized by the Office of Worship for a diocese, and some are even organized to include more than just schools in a diocese. For us, I mentioned this opportunity for fellowship is so great. Our music director, Rick Delafield, has come back with so many wonderful ideas from other directors at our festivals here in the Diocese of Orange. We include a fellowship lunch, and we find that a lot of pastors or rectors also join those lunches to kind of share ideas, and it goes well beyond the music ministry. It also gives, as I said, our learners a chance to really refine their performance skills and to focus on the growth of our music ministry within our diocese. It's also for us here at St. Edward, as well as the high schools that supported our festivals, it's a marketing opportunity. It allows us to share our gifts and talents with those around the diocese and in many cases, prospective applicants to our schools. We have very viable and thriving fine arts schools here in Orange County, and so we have families who are Catholic who really discern, you know, do we send our children to a Catholic school? Are they going to get what they need, or do we stick with the charter schools? So for us, it helps us set our music programs apart, and so that's important. And then it's also an intermediate step toward more regional festivals. Both Lee and I are board members for the American Federation of Pueri Cantores, and we did, at least in our diocese, we took baby steps and started with a diocesan festival before we took our choir to one of the treble festivals, and Lee will talk more about that later in our presentation. So planning the festival here in the Diocese of Orange, and I imagine in just about every diocese, calendar is a huge consideration. We're blessed in that our Department of Catholic Schools and our pastoral ministries, they provide a calendar well in advance of our planning. And so we also seek advice from our superintendent, the pastoral staff, the Office of Worship, so that we avoid any conflicts. And we also take into account, we do star testing here in the Diocese of Orange, and to make sure that our schools are not coming to a festival in the middle of their testing cycle. So we look at the calendar to avoid those kinds of conflicts. We also look at other festivals. As I said, our choir participates in the regional festival for Pueri Cantores, which is typically in March, that area. So we try to schedule ours about 2 months after that festival. Musicians, if they're anything like me, are typically last minute, but we need to get this on the calendars early for principals so that they can plan the logistics on their end, such as field trip forms, transportation, chaperones, getting it on their school calendars as well. When we schedule both our Advent Festival and our Spring Festival, I send a save the date email to my fellow principals through our principal email, and then I also send an email to all the music directors in the diocese. And this includes those who are at parish programs that don't really have a school, just in case they want to bring their parish choir as well. We typically use our own church, but if you were planning a festival for your diocese, you would want to secure a venue that accommodates the variety of needs of the learners who are coming. We have a director within our diocese who has some mobility considerations, and so we need to make sure that we have an accessible area for her to direct her choir. We also need to make sure that all of our students are able to access the risers. We have restroom considerations when you bring together a huge crowd like that, and also we try to keep our costs very low. So we usually use a church that will accommodate a large crowd, where we're not going to have to pay any kind of honorarium to be using that facility. And lastly, we look for an area that is going to be able to accommodate easy access to parking for buses and accessibility to the church without taking the kids through treacherous street conditions. I realize that that's not always practical in all dioceses, but here in the Diocese of Orange, we look for a church that has a large parking lot and lots of available parking. We also consider things like, how are we going to take care of the snack and the lunch, and are there places that the learners can take their breaks and the directors can have their lunch. So all of those aspects are considered. The format of the festival is also something to consider if you are new to planning a choral festival. Here in the Diocese of Orange, we typically use more of a clinician or clinic format versus having an adjudicator. And so we work with two of our high school choirs and their directors, and we use their directors to serve as clinicians. On the screen you see the format of one of our festivals, so we always open with prayer. It's nice to get the students involved in that as well. We try to get our choir members as involved in hosting the day as possible as ambassadors. We also have our students help with the welcome, although that can easily be done by a superintendent, an associate superintendent, even a pastor or a principal. Then our clinician typically will do an all-group warm-up. In the Diocese, we typically have our choir sit with their choir, not necessarily in voice parts, but seating is something that you would also want to consider. You may want to put them in voice parts. For our Advent Festival, where we have fewer choirs, this year we had 8 choirs, we did a joint piece of music, and we selected a piece out of Handel's Messiah that was appropriate for the age level, and it had 2 parts, and we worked on that in the morning together, and then our choirs performed in the later morning and the early afternoon, and then our high school choir came in and we jointly performed that piece that we had all practiced together, which was really fun. Other formats can be more competitive. Obviously the feedback and the nature of the coaching would be different. Again, you might consider seating them in voice parts, and although we don't do awards and recognition in our diocese, that is something that you may want to consider as you begin planning your diocesan festivals. Next, kind of picking your theme or your season. I love the Advent Festival because here at St. Edward we have 2 choirs, and they spend all this time in the fall preparing their beautiful music, and we have one Noel night and a choral concert for our families, but we don't necessarily get to share our music with others in the community. So we have an Advent Festival now where other schools come together and we get to practice our music, rehearse it in front of an audience, get wonderful feedback from our clinician, and really refine our skills before we go into that Noel night concert and our choral concerts here at Christmas time. Some of the considerations that you might want to talk about is, would there be an approved repertoire? For our Advent Festival, most of the music was sacred music. It was related to the season of Advent or Christmas, and so it was all very church appropriate. Our Spring Festival happens to have a more open repertoire, and we have schools that bring in music from Broadway musicals. We have some pop music come in. Obviously, all of that we have approved by our pastors and our principals, but we try to keep it fun and light in the spring, whereas in our Advent Festival it's definitely more sacred in nature. So choosing a repertoire would be something to consider. There are also fabulous festivals out there. Again, American Federation of Choral Control has beautiful festivals all over the country that allow the children to learn our beautiful sacred music and to sing it within the context of a clinic as well as a mass. So those are some things to consider. Fall is a great time for festivals. Obviously Advent, it's a busy time. What I find is I really need to give our directors advance notice on the dates. So I have sent those out in April or May, kind of feeling out what other schools are doing and finding a good date for both our schools and our clinician. Even after Christmas, so celebrating perhaps the Epiphany, coming back after the break and allowing schools to celebrate their music is a fun time. We've never done a summer festival, but that too can be a great time for schools to kind of reconvene and bring people together. Next would be planning a festival in terms of enrollment and marketing. We have a contact list here in our diocese for all the choral directors at the schools, as well as the parish music directors and the principals. So I clean up our database every summer, and I prep all our communications. I use constant contact to send out information, as well as our principal email and direct emails to our choral directors. Promotion really should be both to the music ministers and to the principals. As much as I trust my fellow principals to spread the word, I have found that our weekly principal emails do not always get disseminated to all of the music ministers within the schools and parishes. So it's good to really promote to both of those groups, even if they're getting multiple emails. It keeps it in front of them, front of their minds and their faces, and they remember to sign up. We have in the past extended our festival beyond our diocese. I happen to have a collaborative relationship with the Archdiocese of Seattle, and I have friends up there who love to travel south and join us at our festival. So we've had schools from Seattle, but one of the considerations that we always have to map out is how many schools can we accommodate in the duration of our festival, and we always want to make it open to our diocesan schools first. So would it mean bumping a school from our diocese to include someone outside? So that would be a good conversation point for anyone planning a festival. In our handouts that Andrea will share, I have included a sample of our Advent Choral Festival schedule, as well as our Advent Choral Festival and Clinic registration form. It's an interactive form that's sent to principals and music directors, and then our Spring Diocesan Choral Festival form as well. Both of those forms include a brief bio about our clinicians. In the Diocese of Orange, we try to use and highlight our beautiful high school music program and our very talented and well-respected music directors, and so we typically work with our high schools to find our clinicians. So that also gives them access to this pool of students that eventually will come, ideally, their way in the high school music programs. So you'll see some samples of flyers and forms in the handout section. I'm a big social media person, so I like to share our festival news on our school website, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram sites, and then I also use my own personal principal email or Facebook to share it with people outside of our diocese. So social media has been very helpful in helping us get our word and our festivals out to the public. Finances are always something else to consider. I know the first time we hosted a festival, we didn't take into account travel expenses, accompaniment fees, and so I provided a list here on the slide. So planning a budget, that's where the principal and me comes in, and what are we going to pay our clinician? We typically pay them $350 to $400 for a day, and we pay for their sub fees. We also pay for any travel-related expenses if we do bring someone in from outside. Any accompanist that we need to bring in, we try to have one accompanist there to help all the schools. We find that some schools prefer to have their own, so they'll bring their own accompanist in, or in some cases their choral director actually accompanies the choir. You have to consider if there are any venue-related costs, if the church wants an honorarium, or if you're using a different venue, if there's anything that you need to pay for. Our costs here at St. Edward are free. Our pastor is a musician, and he loves that we share the gift of music with all of our schools, so we are blessed. There is also the consideration of security and supervision anytime you bring a large number of students together. I usually hire a few substitute instructional assistants to kind of help us with logistics, in addition to our volunteer parents who help on our committee. Coordination considerations would be, how do you get choirs to their seats, up to the risers? What are you doing in between the time when you're transitioning one choir to the next? When have a clinician, a lot of times they'll be doing vocal warm-ups or doing some kind of exercise with the other choirs while we are working in the backgrounds to get choirs up and out and on and so forth. Also the restrooms, are they accessible? Are they convenient? Do you need monitors to make sure that you know, the children are safe? And then refresh. So in our diocese, and you'll see in our flyers, we typically pay for all of the snacks, and that comes out of our enrollment fees, and then our students all bring their own lunches. But providing an area for them to have lunch as well as to discard their trash was something we learned the hard way our first year. So make sure that you plan out all of those logistics as well, and plan for those costs. We don't typically do awards or have any kind of recognition, but that would also be a consideration. Funding sources, our events are always fee-based, so we back into our budget. We see what we need to make it a successful event, and then we base our fees on that amount. We do have scholarship available for schools that, where the registration fee is cost prohibitive, and that's usually a benefactor who loves music and wants to see as many children participate as possible. We've applied for grants and letters to get gifts for underwriting. We also do underwriting within our diocese, and then we also consider this part of our admissions and marketing campaign. So we use some of our marketing funds to also underwrite the cost of the event here at St. Edward. Lastly, we always invite, and it's not, it's totally optional, it's not something required, but we do that choirs donate something towards the day. So maybe it's water bottles for the choir students, maybe it's a portion of the director's luncheon, something like that, or decorations. The technical aspects of the day. So again, the schedule, we think about how many choirs can we peacefully accommodate, and in terms of our venue size, what can we accommodate. We back into our schedule number of schools based on our schedule. We typically give them time for 2 songs and then time for coaching and clinician feedback. We try to get every school to use an accompanist. I am a music snob, as most of our choral directors are. We don't love it when they bring in their tapes. It actually grates on my every nerve, but some schools still do. So we try to encourage them to improve the quality of their performance by using a live musician and accompanist. Some of our schools choose to bring instruments, and that's totally fine. It actually adds color and life to our performances. And then we also ask them to dress in uniform in our diocese, and yet some schools prefer to do the choral robes. So we leave that up to them, but the reason I like them to come in uniform is we use a lot of the photographs that we take at our choral festival to promote our music ministry within our diocese, and certainly within our school as well. And that brings me to another technical aspect, behind the scenes kind of aspect, and that is coordinating a media release for all of the students who come to your choral festivals, so that you can freely take pictures, post to social media, send to the newspapers, get a lot of publicity for what you're doing, and be able to freely use the pictures that you take. Here at our school, we always have 2 parents who co-coordinate our festival, and under them they have several committees, and there's a lot of committee support so that our music director can totally focus on the musical aspects of our day. We let him be the creative genius, and we take care of everything behind the scenes, from registration to coordinating lunch and snack, all the logistics of schedule, getting choirs on and off, helping them feel very comfortable in our venue, as well as communications with the choral directors, the principals, and the pastors. We have extra staff that come in on the day of a festival to help us with parking. We put out extra trash cans, we open extra restrooms, and we make sure that our performance space is perfectly adapted for our needs of the festival. Lastly, and then I'll turn it over to Lee, we record, so the feedback to the choirs is the next aspect to consider when planning a festival. And when we are planning a festival, we want to make sure that all of our choirs are getting great positive feedback. We actually record all of the performances throughout the day, and we have an IT clinician who comes in and then does some post-production editing. So it's just the choral performance and the coaching. He takes out all the clinician part of the day, and we also record all of the constructive feedback that our choirs get. Here in the Diocese of Orange, our feedback is recorded to the choirs individually while they are performing. I know Scott Melvin, our director at Mater Dei, has a handheld recorder, and he takes notes and then shares those notes verbally with the choir director in a taped format. But then he also gives verbal feedback to the choir when they're in front of the entire congregation, and it's always very positive. He has them run through pieces. Likewise, Brian Dane, when he hosted our Advent Festival, he too gave live verbal feedback. In the past, we've also had a rubric that we've used for evaluation, and so the choral directors also get that written feedback, which is, again, really constructive. It's all focused on helping them build their music ministry and further enhance the gifts and talents of their choirs. And lastly, and this I'm going to let Lee speak to, we always get feedback from our directors, so the feedback goes both ways. What kind of repertoire do they want to see? Do they want more direction in future festivals? In the Diocese of Orange, as I said, we have an Advent Festival that's more traditional and more sacred in nature, and then our Spring Festival is really kind of free and fun. So we always find out from our directors, is this working? Should we change anything? You know, so that it's a festival that really needs as well. And Lee, I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was a great wealth of information, and I want to tell those of you that are here gathered for this webinar that I have such a passion for the great sacred music of the Church being taught in all our Catholic schools. I have been involved in Catholic school education since I was an organist in 2nd grade for the Stations of the Cross at my school. And I want you to know that you all have a great opportunity to teach the great treasures of the Church in your schools, because we don't have the hindrance of you can't do this or that in public schools where you're not allowed to sing about God or religion. We have the blessing that we can do all styles of music, including that of our faith. And what a wealth of repertoire. And by having these diocesan festivals and these masses, as well as the ones for Pueri Cantoris, this gives us an opportunity to teach the great sacred music, not only from chant, but even the contemporary music of today. So I was really kind of struck that many of you have not been able to participate in some of our festivals, but I do want you to know that our American Federation of Pueri Cantoris is part of an international organization that is based in the Vatican. So we have an official organization that is very much supported by the Holy Father and the Holy See. It was particularly revitalized during St. John Paul II's tenure. He wanted this to start up again, to have the International Federation have Pueri Cantoris organizations in every diocese throughout the world, and that is happening. We are doing the best we can. So I am proud to also be the president of the American Federation of Pueri Cantoris, and every 5 years we gather in Rome with the Holy Father, where we get to meet with him in an audience where he shares about his view about the importance of sacred music. And like, for example, Pope Francis said to all of us that he loves music and that he loves to sing, but it was his parents who said that you sound like a donkey when you sing, and so he stopped singing. So, but he says he loves music, and in spite of that, he does the best he can. So he has a passion for great liturgical music, especially on the education level. And so you can see on this screen here that we have festivals all over the country, and hopefully near you, that after you present your diocesan festivals, you may want to participate in one that's kind of near you in your region. If you do participate, we encourage you to use the repertoire. Even if you don't participate, there's great wealth of repertoire that we have in all our festivals that you can use in your schools for your school masses. And so that is always our goal. When we plan repertoire, we say, well, how much of this can they use in their actual schools? So you see we have festivals in Miami, which I will be conducting. We have different levels of festivals. We have the treble festivals, which is just sopranos and altos in grades 4 through 8. We have then a mixed voice, which is grades 4 through 12. And then we just have a high school one, grades 9 through 12. Some go as early as grade 8. But they're all over the country, and we encourage you to be a part of that. In the next slide, you will see that we have a sample of the repertoire that is being planned for our treble festivals. And you notice it opens up with a choral prelude and almost has become our theme song. Michael Praetoris's Jubilate Deo is a great start for all of our festivals. It's around and it's easy to pick up. And this year, this is the repertoire we chose, a contemporary piece, Surely It Is God Who Saves Me. And then if you look at the structure of the Mass, you see that we have a selected entrance hymn if it's Lent or if it's Easter. And then if you look at the ordinary parts of the Mass, these are parts of the chant that every child should know, the Kyrie from Missa de Angelis. We had in the past for many, many years the Gloria from Missa de Angelis that many of us have sung. We may reinsert that back into the festivals. Right now it's the John Lee Congregational Mass. And if you look at the Sanctus, that's the chant. Memorial Great Amen is from a Festival Eucharist, that's in English. The Agnus Dei from Missa de Angelis. These are things you can already teach your school choirs or all your children who experience Mass at your schools. Then at the Liturgy of the Eucharist, there's always a special anthem. So whenever you participate in a festival, you have to focus on preparing the choral prelude, which is the Jubilate Deo, and another piece. And then at the offertory, there's a special piece. In this case, it's a two-part piece. I Give You a New Commandment by Peter Aston from the Royal School of Church Music. All of these are easy and can be done in your own schools. And then at communion, a post-communion, we're singing the beautiful Ave Maria of Gabriel Fauré. And then we conclude with a great, great piece with the organ and sometimes with instruments. In this case, it's Let Us Magnify His Name. So that's a treble choir festival. Let's shift to the next one, the repertoire for the middle school festivals. The mixed schools, the mixed voices. There you see we begin with another round, Da Pacem Domine, which is for SATB. And then we just go, again, to example of a diversity of our repertoire, a Zambian song of praise called Bonze Abba, and it's quite exciting for the children to perform that. It means all people, and I will be playing you a sample of that in a minute later on in this webinar. And they do the same, Kyrie, the same Gloria as the other festivals, but you notice that at the preparation of the gifts, we do like With a Voice of Singing, which is a classic piece by Martin Shaw, a classic choral piece, and we offer links to that. And then at communion, it's Ave Verum of Elgar. In the past, it was Ave Verum of Mozart. And then at the end, Lift Up Your Heads. Then we shift to the high school festivals are different in format. It's not part of the Mass in the next page. It's actually a clinic. We teach the high school choirs two pieces. very much like how you do your diocesan festivals, where you would have two pieces chosen at the beginning and one at the end, and all the choirs will sing these two anthems together. In this case, it's with the voices singing and the Kyrie from Missa Secunda. And these, what happens is at the high school festivals, the clinician works with your choir on two pieces of your choice, sometimes three pieces. So we clinic your choir with whatever they have prepared. So we go on now to the next page. And just to tell you about the experience of the festival. You see a picture of a festival that was done in the Cathedral of Savannah, where we had over 800 youth singers from all over the dioceses of Georgia. When we all gather together, usually it's in a beautiful cathedral or a very large space in the diocese. This enables all choirs to experience a great choral sound together. The choral clinicians like myself and others, Paul French, work with them so that they can achieve the great hallmarks of sound from tone to text. As soon as they get there, you would think, well, we'll keep the choirs together. Well, we actually don't. We actually mix them up according to their section, whether they're soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or in height, and then we position them to become a new choir. Obviously, height's very important so that they can see the conductor who is in the sanctuary. Again, we sing all the music from chant to contemporary. And usually in these spaces, it's very resounding, so it becomes a very positive sound experience. And most choirs who have participated in these festivals go away with the feeling that they have created a choir of angels ensemble, offering what we would call a foretaste of the experience of heaven. I heard that quote from Pope John Paul II when I had the opportunity to conduct the World Youth Day event in Denver. The Holy Father came to us before Mass, and he looks at the choir and says, "You have a very important role during today's liturgy. You represent the choirs of angels, and these choirs of angels, you offer a foretaste of what heaven will be like." So we as school teachers need to enable our children to sing the best they can so that we can all experience the beauty and joys of heaven and not the horrible things of, well, could I say hell? Anyway, the next slide. By the way, we do have a handout of all the festivals, 2017 festival. That's one of the first handouts, and the last handouts has the sample of repertoire. You can go to the website for Pueri Cantores, which is pcchoirs.org, pcchoirs.org. Here is a little bit of a snippet of the huge Chicago Schools Festival with comments from Cardinal George. Cardinal George was our first moderator assigned. We have a bishop or cardinal assigned to be head of the American Federation of Pueri Cantores, and the late Cardinal George was our first person in charge of the American Federation. He himself was a member of a boy choir, and he was our champion. Let's listen to a little bit of this choir of 1,000 voices.
Well, as well as a world traveler, you're also an appreciator of fine music. And I know you recently had the privilege of celebrating Mass at Holy Name Cathedral, along with the Pueri Cantores, a choir of 1,000 voices. It was a spectacular gathering of Catholic school students from the Archdiocese of Chicago, as well as the Diocese of Rockford and Joliet. Our radio and TV office was on hand to document the historic event.
Simply, it's the Latin words for children, singers, so they use Pueri Cantores, and it means simply the children's singers of the church. And great group, been around since the 40s, after the war, and Second World War, and singing God's peace and God's praise, so we hope the children are instruments of that peace.
Singing here at Holy Name Cathedral was a great experience for me. I really had fun, and I really appreciate the school bringing us here because it was a great experience.
we gather young singers from grades 4 through high school, senior in high school, to come together to sing the Lord's Praise in using great sacred music, Gregorian chant, sacred motets, polyphony, in a way to say that there is power, there's catechesis, there is great potential for the church by singing this music that they usually don't sing in their own churches. And it's, you know, as you can see from an event like this today, it's a wonderful experience for children, for their parents, for their schools, principals, teachers, choir directors. It's a win-win for everybody.
It was really interesting. Like, the conductor had a different style of conducting. It was interesting to learn that new style of conducting. And it was interesting to meet all these different people that came to sing with us. I was one of the lectors for reading today, and when I went back to the sacristy and I met the cardinal, I was just excited. It was a great experience for me.
So you get an idea of what the festival would be like. And this is a sample of when Chicago brings all the schools together. And there's other dioceses that do that for a Pueri Cantoris festival. They bring all the Catholic schools together, and this is during the week, during the day. Some time it during Catholic Schools Week. And this is a chance for them to go to their cathedral or their basilica and to meet their bishop or their cardinal. And you can see it was a joyful, wonderful experience. Here's a sample of a festival I conducted last year in 2016 in Winter Park. This is the sample Jubilate Deo round for a treble festival. Let's take a listen. Position 3 means for them to stand. Okay, you get an idea of that. You notice that the children have beautiful angelic sounds, and when we do clinicking work with them, we teach them how to use their head voice well during these festivals. Because a lot of our children have the temptation to sing in their chest voice if that's all we teach. So these festivals allow them to experience great head voice with the larger group. Let's now take a listen to or take a look at some of the pictures of festivals that happen all over the USA. It tells you the impact Pueri Cantoris is having. Let's take a look. I conducted this 9/11 Mass. Lots of school choirs. Let's go on to the next slide now. This is a sample of a music festival, of a high school choir festival that I did in California last year. It was a relatively small group. The high school festival are a new format, and so this last year was our test season. So this was done at the University of Southern California in the beautiful new chapel that they just built for the university's Catholic school students. This beautiful chapel with great acoustics. Let's take a listen to them singing the Agnus Dei by Cassiolini. Okay, that much. It gives you an idea of a polyphonic piece that high school choirs can do. Over the webinar, it's kind of hard to get the sense of that on these YouTube videos. Here is something we do also with Pueri Cantores. We have national festivals, and our next national one will be in Chicago during July 4th week in the Cathedral in Chicago in 2018. But take a listen. This is the one we did in Washington, D.C., our last national festival, which actually turned out to be an international festival. We had choirs from all over the world. Take a listen and look. This is done at the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. It was a stunning festival. Let's go on to something else because I want to give you all time for questions. The next slide shows you a sample of the Texas festival we had in Texas. This is a sample of Bonza Abba as sung by the Texas Festival choirs with choirs from all over Texas. All right, that gives you an idea of that one. And here's one of our pieces that would be great if you would have a diocesan festival. It's called Jesus Here Present. It's part of our choir series, Pueri Cantores Choral Series, which is all published by World Library Publications. World Library is the publisher of all Pueri Cantores pieces. And this is something that I had arranged that is also great for if you had First Communion processions of all the First Communicants. This is a great medieval piece. Take a listen. This is also done at the festival in Texas. You hear them performing from the back of the cathedral, in this case. The choirs are processing in from the back, so it sounds kind of quiet. Okay, that gives you an example of that wonderful piece. That's all the children need to learn is that one section, and it repeats 3 times, and it ends with a very exciting ending. It's pretty stunning and pretty thrilling. So let's go on now to question time. Kathy, any concluding thoughts from you, or we would love to address questions at this time.
Absolutely. I just have a few comments. As a principal, I've taken 2 of my schools to Pueri Cantores regional festivals, and in every case, the festival experience far exceeded our expectations, both as educators, as music directors. The absolutely love the opportunity to join us at Mass at the end of the festivals, and it really has the opportunity to change your music program. So I would encourage, I know a very high percentage of our participants today have not participated in an American Federation of Pueri Cantores Festival, so I would ask you to consider, starting with that. Also, several of you have never participated in a diocesan festival. If you are in a role where you're hoping to plan one, my contact information is on the screen. I am happy to share my budgets with you. I'm happy to share our social media plans with you. I'm very open to any questions that you might have, and my goal is, as an educator, to really help bring music to life in our schools. It's a great history and tradition that we have, and let's keep it alive. Our contact information is on that last slide, so if you have any questions, feel free to. And then we did have a question, and it was from the Diocese of Pittsburgh. So the question is, can we organize a Pueri Cantores Festival for grades 4 through 12 in the spring of 2018 in Pittsburgh? So I'm going to let you field that one.
Well, absolutely you can do that. Where we need support of is, if we prefer it being in the Cathedral, which is the seat of the bishop. And so the musicians at the Cathedral need to support the idea of that. Or you could go to your office of worship to help encourage that. We would also entertain perhaps another larger parish if that's the case. But yes, we need champions in every one of our dioceses to want to have a festival in their region. So feel free to contact us at pcchoirs.org on our website. There is a contact information there. Our executive director is Jan Schmidt. There also was a question now of how to separate sopranos and altos. And what I do is I check their ranges, and usually grades 4 through 6 to 7, 3 to 6 have the same range. I put those who are able to sing in harmony on part 2. If they can hold a harmony part, I put them as leaders in part 2. Everyone can sing the melody, but if you have kids that are gifted to sing part 2, then in that case, I would put the best singers in part 2. So that is how I established that, because at that range, they all have about the same range. It's when they get into high school where they become truly soprano, altos, or tenors or basses.
The next question was, how early do you send the save the date cards? I'm assuming that's for diocesan festivals, but I'll also address it with regard to the Pueri festivals. So for our Advent festivals, we typically send the save the date in April or May as principals are finalizing their calendars for the next academic year. For our spring festival, we get that on the diocesan calendar in March for the following year. So a full year and 2 months in advance, so that schools can really plan, and our Diocese Department of Catholic Schools can plan around that date. We also need that much time to secure our clinicians, and although we've usually secured them well in advance of that, but getting the save the date out as early as possible is really important. The Pueri festivals, we send those dates out. I'm going to say I had those dates by May of this year, maybe even late April. And as a principal, again, that's really important to have that information so that I can plan in advance for my choir. I can navigate the budget for my choir. I can consider what our choir fees are going to be for the year, knowing if that date is going to work for us. I know last year our local or our regional festival was the same date as our decathlon, our academic decathlon, and we play in that too. So we had to make some choices, and having that early date was important.
Well, lots of questions are coming up. Jerry, in regards to can you download the music? Most of the music you can download that's on the website, pcchoirs.org, and you can click on repertoire, like some of the chants and all that stuff you can download. There will have some pieces you may have to order. There's also, do you know when there might be a Pueri Cantores Festival in St. Louis again? Contact Jan Schmidt on our website. That's a good question. Again, the champion needs to be whoever's music minister at your cathedral or in your diocese. That would help. How do you work with African American children whose directors do not care for the young ones but encourage loud singing? Oh, well, can you look at the last question, Kathy, on risk management? Okay, and I will think about that question above.
Okay, so this is a great question. The question was written in a format that suggests there could be choirs that focus on more loud voices, and we certainly have that in the Diocese of Orange. We also have choirs that are very much into performance and choreography and not so much in vocal quality. And so it's really our clinicians' job to coach our choirs, to get them to use their head voice. Not all our choirs in the Diocese of Orange use the head voice. A lot of them, again, are very kind of show tunes oriented, very theatrical, and it's all about loud and, you know, facial expressions, which is fun, but it's not focused on the quality of music that we're trying to really establish and reinforce. So I would say the clinician, working with them in advance, and when we send out our save the dates, we really encourage, and our registration forms, we really encourage choirs to use our and I mentioned this earlier, to use our accompanist versus a tape, and we usually kind of set the tone of the quality of music we're looking for with the first few choirs we have perform and the last choirs we have perform.
When I've worked with school teachers in Catholic schools, many of them are not familiar with the child's voice, and that's why I do child's voice workshops all over the country. They don't know that there's the head voice, there's the chest voice, and all they become are a choir of screamers instead of singers, and so it's a matter of educating our music teachers about the voice. Many of them don't know about the voice. Some of them might be band directors, they have instrumental background but no vocal background. Would you agree, Kathy?
Yes, I would. We have a lot of musical theater graduates who actually end up taking choirs in some of our elementary schools. It's one of those things in Catholic school where, you know, you wear many hats, and sometimes that happens. So it's an opportunity for the clinician to really help the directors as well, and our festivals end up being educational for both directors and the students that are involved. There's a question about, are there risk management concerns such as insurance that we consider that you have not yet mentioned? Well, absolutely. So here in our Diocese of Orange, every time our schools take a field trip, we have student accident insurance that is provided by a company called Myers and Stevens, and it's the principal's job to ensure that they are using the proper field trip forms, that they're going through the protocols, i.e. checking all of their chaperones through our Safe Environment program. They also need to make sure that they're getting their student accident insurance and have it active on the day of the festival. If you're doing any kind of overnight festival, like when we take our kids to Rome, which I've done twice, we also use, we have an addendum to that policy, and it's an overnight student insurance policy that we get for every day that we're on the road. As a site, ideally your site is covered by I know we have students on our campus all the time, and so as well as parishioners, and that is a consideration. Are you carrying enough insurance should one of the kids, you know, slip and fall, or a director? So that would be something to consider. Here at our site, we have all that insurance, which is, again, another thing to consider when you're looking at venues. If it's a church site and you're working with Catholic students, they should be covered by the policies that you have in place.
Great. I'm giving you also...
how do I become...
Yeah, I'm putting a link to how do you become a member of Pueri Cantores. There's a link there onto the website that will be passed on to you. We have a lot of resources that can be provided. First of all, in our repertoire, we also have something that we did for the NCEA, was a list of all kinds of music that Catholic schools should be doing, like hymns and responsorial psalms. Do you recall receiving that yourself, Kathy?
I do, yes.
Yeah,
as a music minister, we got it.
Right. And so we determined what should every Catholic child know in regards to hymns, in regards to chant, in regards to repertoire. We have that list, and for those of you that are on the webinar, we can pass that on to you by request. And it's also responsorial psalms that you can use, so this is a great thing for you all to utilize.
Perfect. It looks like that's our last question. So we'll be sure to provide Andrea all of our handouts so that those are accessible to any of the participants today. And
yes, and thank you,
Kathy
and Lee. And I want to let our audience know that we had so many handouts and resources that Kathy and Lee were good enough to share with us that I couldn't fit them all in the GoToWebinar handout section live, but I will be including all of them, including links to membership information in the follow-up email that you'll receive within 24 hours. A lot of you have asked for the presentation slides. Yes, you will get them. You'll get all their handouts, and you will receive this recording within 1 business day. And we're happy to provide that to you. Before we conclude, I invite you all to visit our website at ncea.org to see listings for both upcoming webinars and other professional development activities. Thank you, Lee and Kathy, for spending your time with us today and sharing your expertise. I just want to remind our audience that you will receive this recording as well as the presentation materials via email tomorrow. If you have any questions, I will also be including Lee and Kathy's contact information so you can reach out directly to them. Thank you for being such a great and active audience this evening. I thank you all and have a blessed evening.